Divine Renovation exists to inspire, connect, and equip priests and their parishes to go from maintenance to mission. For every Catholic parish to be a place where people can come and have their lives transformed by entering into relationship with Jesus. On today's podcast, Emily Sitt, a parish leader from Our Lady of Fatima, joins us from Auckland, New Zealand. Emily shares her own faith journey and how a focus on the primacy of evangelization has changed her parish. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Divine Renovation podcast. I'm your host, Jacqueline Marie, and I'm with my co-host, Dan O'Rourke, the president of Divine Renovation. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Jacqueline. How you doing? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I was just realizing I always say host and then co-host as if we're separate roles. We're not. I'm a co-host as well.
Truth is, they are separate roles. You put more into making sure that we're ready to go. I just kind of show up and hopefully, I get to go on the journey with you. That's basically my goal.
I actually am so excited for today. We're going to be meeting with Emily Sitt, who is this woman in New Zealand that I met about a year ago, a little bit more, that I absolutely love her story of what happened with her and what's going on in her parish. Did you meet her actually at the Australasia conference this past year?
At the Australasia conference, it's possible, but now you've made it very awkward for me. There was 500 and some odd people there. Like I met a lot of people.
Do you know her middle name?
Yeah, right. While I've been to New Zealand, because I would have I've spoken in New Zealand before. I've never been to Auckland.
Really?
I don't think I've ever been to Auckland. I don't even think I've flown through Auckland. Although it's possible I've flown through Auckland, but I've never landed for any length of time.
Oh.
And so while I've been in other parts of New Zealand, I've actually never been to Auckland. So it's a blind spot in my life that I will no doubt repair at some point. The next time I get a chance to go back down to New Zealand. It's a beautiful country.
Yes. Oh, I'm so interested. So you went to Christchurch, I'm guessing then. Is that?
Yeah. I was there. I was in Christchurch for a stretch. It was wonderful.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I believe that we're right at that point where she's about to appear on our screens and we're going to say hi. So I won't spoil the rest. Hello, Emily. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Divine Renovation podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We first chatted a little over a year ago, and I remember you telling me about this moment that you were sitting, I think in Kuala Lumpur, at an Alpha conference, and you saw Father James appear, I think on a screen, because I think it was a breakout that was virtual because of the timing.
That's right.
And you looked at his collar and were surprised. Could you bring us to that moment and just share a bit about why you were surprised?
Well, he was talking about parish renewal. Father James, a younger Father James, was talking about parish renewal. And I was like, wait, parish? Wait, collar? Parish renewal? That's not possible. Not in our church. And I was shocked. Like I was so fixated on what he was saying, and it was, I was just so shocked that could be possible for our parish. And I was in KL, so I wasn't attending a regular parish at that stage. But I was like, imagine if that happened in New Zealand. Going to church could be fun.
I love it. Yeah. So I remember when it wasn't that long ago, Emily, that Father James went on that trip to Kuala Lumpur. I'm trying to remember what year it was. The pandemic has blurred all things in my brain in terms of years. So maybe it has been much longer than I appreciate. But I remember when he was going out and completely unclear. It often happens this way with Divine Renovation, right? It's like, we'll do the things that we think God's asking us to do. We have no idea if it's going to have any impact or bear any fruit. And, so Father James Mallon, of course, founder of Divine Renovation, buddy of mine, and an author of the first Divine Renovation book and a few after that, actually. When he went out there, I remember the talk back here in Halifax was like, no idea what's going to come of it. But now I'm sitting across a Zoom table from some fruit of that very conference. So that talk and his getting up on stage and sharing some of his vision anyway. So that really caught fire with you.
It did. And even in KL now, I've had some priest friends who went to that time that Father James actually went to KL, and they loved him.
Oh,
They loved
really?
him. Yeah.
That's so encouraging.
Yes, and remind me, like you were working in KL, but don't I sound so like global in that moment?
Yeah,
Like I can
really,
call
really
Kuala
global.
Lumpur KL. Yeah. So you were working in KL, but you're from Auckland. Is that right? Like your family
Yeah.
was in Auckland still?
I was born in Malaysia, but I grew up in New Zealand, and then I spent 10 years abroad working in Asia. And that was when I was at the Alpha Conference in KL.
What brought you to the
So-
Alpha Conference?
Yes, sir. Go ahead there, Dan.
Oh my gosh, really? I've never been so involved in parish life as I have in the last 3 years, since the pandemic and since Alpha. In fact, I don't want to say typical because I'm putting that on everybody, but when I was going through university, I didn't need God. I'd only go to church for mum and dad, and only at Easter. I did love the Easter Triduum. But I really didn't have a faith. I believed in God, the secular gospel. I believed in God, but, on my terms, my own way, because I know that he loves me. But while I was in Malaysia and having my own business, it really got to a low point. And at that stage, I was just like screaming out to like, why are we doing this? And why am I here? And then started to listen to a lot of Hillsong's music, as you do, praise and worship, just to get the good God feels. And I was actually looking for the music, and I realized I was Googling a bit about Alpha, Googling about praise and worship, and Alpha Conference came up, and they had really it was so superficial. It was just photos of, praise and worship, and then, Alpha talk. And I've heard about Alpha a little bit. And so that would scroll. And I'm like, okay, I'll sign up. So I signed up, and I actually live in East Malaysia. So I had to fly over to KL for that conference. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And then, am I right in thinking that this moment where you're having this huge moment where your faith is changing, then you're not expecting that to be rooted also in your Catholic upbringing as well. So you see Father James in this breakout, and then you end up back in New Zealand shortly after that is it because of the pandemic that you end up back in New Zealand shortly after that?
Well, I was always planning to come home, and I was flying in and out between home and between the business in Malaysia, and then I got stuck.
And then you got stuck in Auckland. I see.
In Auckland.
Okay. So, Dan, the part that I love that you have to hear about this is that Emily ends up doing a book study of Father James's book, the first one, From Maintenance to Mission, with a group of priests and a bishop. A group of priests and a bishop.
Yeah.
Bishop
Michael.
Okay, so how does that happen?
Who wasn't a bishop then?
Okay.
I see. Okay. Yes. Okay. So tell me the story. How do you end up in a book study with a bunch of priests and a future bishop?
It was after the first time we had lockdown. That was early 2020, and I went up to Father Austin, who's the same parish priest that we have now, and I said, Father, we need to do something for this parish. It's like dead, and like faith formation, or something. And that was 1 week. Then I'd come back the next week because we were hungry also to come back to church after being in lockdown for a month. I was like, Father, have you read Divine Renovation? Like, have you read it? Like, I've got a copy. Like, I brought it to him, and he's like, and Father Austin's he's very quiet, right? And he's quite shy, and it was the first 3 months since he had come to our parish. And here's me. That was also the first 3 months I've come back from being overseas, right? And being stuck in, then coming back and being stuck in pandemic. So we really didn't know each other. And I was like, have you read this book? And he's like, yeah, he came to Christchurch. He came to Christchurch because he had come to Christchurch in 2019. And I was like, okay. And he goes, actually, we're doing a Zoom online book study. We're doing it all with the priests. And I was like, in my heart, I was like, really? And I didn't say anything to him because I didn't want to be too forward. And I was like, really? it's amazing. Like, Lord, you're doing something. And so I left it. But then I went home and the Lord put something on my heart. I was like, Em, you just got to ask. Ask if you can be a fly in the room. Ask if you can be behind the computer with the camera, and just listen. Listen to what the conversations are when they're discussing renovating our parishes. And so I wrote him an email and I said, Father, is it okay if I just come on the side? I don't have to participate. I just want to listen. And he asked permission of the person who was a deacon that was running the Zoom and the book study, and it was yes. And there I met many of the priests that are in DR now, and of course Father Michael, who's now Bishop Michael.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And of course, it must have been quite something. So can I push you? What's one or two fly on the wall things that you were takeaways for you in that experience?
Oh my gosh, it was so long ago. So much has happened since then, Dan. I think they shared a lot of, because we were just coming in out of it was the first lockdown. They just shared a lot of the pain points, which are actually the same that we have now. That how do we engage with our parishioners? The same things of getting parishioners coming, but they're coming only or new RCIA candidates, but they're coming in just to get into schools, and really not having a faith, or a personal encounter with Christ. I think personal encounter came up, like everybody's just going through the motions.
Right.
And how can we use what we haven't had because of the pandemic? How can we use that to grow our parishes and to bring them to a personal encounter?
Sometimes a conversation occasionally happens around the name Divine Renovation. 'Cause it's an interesting name for a book. It's also an interesting name for a ministry. And so far I've heard Father James talk about it many, many times. Obviously he chose to name his book Divine Renovation. And what I love about the name is the word renovation in Latin, renovare, means to make new again. And I think that's the journey that we look to accompany priests on. It's like, can we make your parish new again?
Yeah.
And so that notion of divine renovation, that name, that title, when I think of sort of that season, that post-pandemic season, which we all journeyed through, right? In terms of, okay, so what's life like now? And I think even excluding the pandemic, because Divine Renovation as a ministry was working before the pandemic and accompanying priests on this journey. Even before, the pain points were the same. They were masked a little bit in a lot of instances. And so, the pain perhaps wasn't as deep in some spaces. But the pandemic, it just unveiled some of that stuff. It didn't make it worse. It didn't exacerbate it. It just kind of unveiled the problems that were already there. Mm. And that call for all of us to step forward to try and make these parishes new again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am so interested too in how, first of all, I love the way that God orchestrates things, because at the same time that these priests in Auckland are already meeting, they were already wanting to go through the book. They already wanted to do this. You've now gone through this process where you've come home from Kuala Lumpur. You're really on fire about the book. So how long after going through the book study together do you end up wanting to start an alpha?
The same year. The same year. The same year. And it's funny, as you said, Jacqueline, just how the Lord works, because at the same time I'm trying to get to know Father Austin, right? And we're still in this phase where I'm really trying to move, but he's a lot slower. So and I love that, because it just shows how different we are and how that's a balanced team. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, so should we do alpha? And he'll be like, no, we'll just wait. That was after we'd finished the book. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, he'll be like, okay, let's do alpha. So I'm like, okay, so don't do alpha. So then I just peel back a bit. And then in 2 weeks' time, he's like, okay, let's do alpha. And so, and that's And that's really how it all started. And then we touched base with the deacon that was on the call, and he took us through with Alpha New Zealand on how to run our first Alpha. That's also where I met Cheryl.
Oh, excellent.
Oh,
yeah.
Isn't Cheryl Surrey?
Cheryl, sorry.
So just in case the people might be listening who are less familiar with Alpha, Alpha is an evangelization program. It's our favorite evangelization program. Although we don't, parishes that journey on this parish renewal journey, they don't need to use Alpha. It's just been, in our experience, it's been sort of the most fruitful of all the evangelization programs out there, which is why we recommend it so much. We also recommend Cheryl Surrey, who heads up Divine Renovation New Zealand for us. And so you ended up connecting with her. So how did that encounter happen then, Emily?
So her parish priest was on that call, the Zoom's book study.
Okay.
And so from there, the question was asked, do you need help? Would you like to start Alpha, and do you need help? And then Father Robert of Pukekohe Parish, St. Patrick's, then invited some of the team to participate, or asked some of the team, and they were like, yep, we're in Alpha. And they paired us together. So we would go to Pukekohe, because it's about 40 minutes drive between Meadowbank and Pukekohe. So, would have a session in Pukekohe and meet their team just to get to know each other. And then they came to Meadowbank for the next session of training. And the rest is kind of history.
So tell me
what number of Alphas are you on now? Because that was your first Alpha.
That was our first. So the first Alpha started in February 2021. And we're starting our sixth Alpha in August, in a month's time.
Wow. Yeah. That's so in less than 3 years, you're starting your sixth.
Yes. So 2 a year.
Excellent. How did that first Alpha go? So give me the picture. How much did you mess up? Everyone messes it up a little bit. Surely you messed it up too, Emily.
Everything messed up. The only thing we did mess up was the food.
Hey, well.
That's an important thing to get right. That is important.
Everything we messed up. Just I always thought that maybe I should do an Alpha. Excuse me. I always thought that maybe I'd do an Alpha first myself to experience it as a guest. But Deacon was like, no, just go ahead and do it. And so there was a lot of no confidence when we went to it. And the team, we were just all green, because we were listening to the content for the first time. So small groups would have not comfortable pauses, like really long pauses, as in like, oh, what am I going to say now? I mean, the questions are there, but it doesn't fit, or it was so awkward, and we didn't really. So now at Alpha 6, at our sixth Alpha, we pray so much, we pray so much. Whereas before it was just uncomfortable, like what do we say, like Our Father who art in heaven? But then we're told we're not supposed to do that because Alpha's not the context, and that was, well, it should be in Catholic context, but at that time we were like, oh, how do we pray? Like, what's prayer, right? Because we as a team and the leadership now learned that all from Alpha. And it's really quite amazing when we look back, because, all the impromptu prayers that we have now, that's in the prayer ministry, that's really fruits from Alpha. And I really screwed that part up at the beginning. A lot of silence.
It so perfectly matches our experience, Emily, of any parish that sort of leans into Alpha and then gets it right.
Yeah.
Because I think what you see is that notion of Alpha as a program. I mean, what is the quote we occasionally toss about? Alpha as a program is okay. Alpha as a culture is amazing. Yeah. And so that your whole culture of prayer can become predicated on just how is prayer experienced and lived out at your Alpha tables, because it becomes normative for those new Christians, or those people who've fallen back in love, or perhaps in love with Jesus for the first time. What that experience of prayer is, and that extends beyond, but sometimes includes sort of the rote prayers. Like, it can be so much more and so much deeper and so much more meaningful. And so creating that culture out of Alpha is the thing that, provides so much life and vitality to a parish. And it sounds like you guys got that really right.
we're on the journey.
No.
We're on the journey.
Now she's walking it back on me, Jacqueline.
Yeah, well, I want to actually point out, I remember you talking about some of the things culturally that did start changing in the parish in terms of, I think you said something to me like people would turn to each other in the pew now and they'd be able to say like, I've had this whole love for Jesus and I haven't felt comfortable just out of politeness, like turning and talking to the person next to me in the pew about it. And yeah, was that right from Alpha 1 that started happening where people started finding that voice?
Yeah. I think just coming in for mass and smiling, coming into mass and or just even in the foyer and just being able to greet people that they knew through Alpha, they met through Alpha, just that. And I think, and it was noticeable, right? I mean, we hear it all the time, but it really happens. And so from there, people would be like, why is everybody smiling at mass? Why are people talking to each other? Because it would be before and then it would be after, and it wasn't just like a cordial, hey, hello, have a good weekend, and then out. It was like, no, it's really animated and full of life, just very quite opposite to what we were used to.
Emily, you're writing about, you said that when you saw Father James Mallon, when you saw him speak in KL, you said, oh, wouldn't it be amazing to have a church where people actually wanted to be? And now you're describing people smiling and wanting to be at church. Like,
I know.
Is it, do you feel that? Do you is that really what's happened?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, now after the third year being in Alpha, doing Alpha, you can really see that. You can see the vibrancy happening in the pews and definitely outside in the foyer.
Father Austin's got to be delighted at the level of commitment that he's got from the people around him. I mean, like that's beautiful. And you said you were running a business in Malaysia or KL. Are you still running a business? Like, what's that look like for you now? Are you?
I work as a general manager at St. Francis Retreat Centre.
Okay.
In Auckland. So we had to close the business in Malaysia because of the pandemic. But
Gotcha.
Really, that's how the Lord works.
Absolutely. I mean, look where he's brought you. I mean, like you found yourself in multiple ministry roles that perhaps were unexpected as a result.
Yes, really, really.
I love listening to when you're talking. When I think about the start of this journey that's gone from, you say when you went to mass, it was for your parents, kind of thing. So like that point to, I don't know if you would call it, I don't know what you'd call it, coming back to your faith or whatever. But becoming so on fire that then you come back to Auckland and there's this parish renewal that's happening there, but that it all starts with this little moment of praise, because you're saying you're being drawn to listening to songs, praising God. And I was literally just thinking, so when Dan and I were chatting before you came on, we were talking about like getting to mass on time and all those things, when we're talking about how punctual we tended to be. One of the things that's really upsetting for me is if I feel that I'm going to show up and almost all the moments where there would be hymns or worship would be over. Because to me, and I recognize that the peak moment is actually the Eucharist, but all those moments leading up to it are so tangible and sweet that it does feel like I've missed out, like I've gotten left behind if I don't get to have those moments. So I get like having this sense of God like wooing us almost, like through the language of music. I'm curious if that has translated through for you, that it was just that moment, or that's continued. Has that continued with Alpha? Like, what has that been for you?
Really, this is the Lord working. When I went to, so after Alpha Conference in KL and experiencing the praise and worship there, I started then, so in between that, I started going to Hillsong conferences because I wanted the music, right? So I went to Sydney twice to be in a stadium of 20,000 and for that. But it's also there that I realized that that's not our church, right? So it was great to be in all that, like the concert, but from there I really realized that's not our church. And then fast forward to being in New Zealand. So at Alpha 1, we didn't do any music. At the end of Alpha 1, for some reason, someone spoke to me about maybe being able to play guitar, or maybe we could just have YouTube videos or something. And I said, well, if you play guitar, do you want to try something? And so she, we met one time, and then we sang together, we played together, and we're like, okay, maybe we'll try. And then I invited my sister, who's a bass player. And Alpha 2, we fumbled through, just try to bring some music into Alpha. And the thing is, that was when we went into lockdown again. And so we had to go from a face-to-face to an online one, and with different rules. But what we did was we got to keep this going. And anyway, we have so much time to practice together. So the three of us would meet at our house, and then we would play on Zoom, the three of us on this side for everybody at Alpha, right? And so we really got out of our comfort zone to do that. But now fast forward to today, that group has grown. We call that Alpha Music. That group has grown to include a cajon and a pianist and 3 other voices. And we're doing the praise and worship for the parish.
No way.
For the parish. The Alpha Music Group now actually does all the music for your parish. I love that.
Yeah. Well, not all, because we have other music ministries.
Yeah.
But the praise and worship.
Praise and worship.
That's
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I know.
So
love
give me a sense of this Alpha journey. I love Alpha 1, Alpha 2. I pray for the day where you're in Alpha 75, Alpha.
Oh my gosh! I think, how old am I going to be then?
You'll be fine. Don't you worry. You just got to up the number of alphas in a year. So like when you look at Alpha 1 and that journey through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as you step in towards 6. Have you seen, like, what are some of the fruits have you seen? Have you seen growth? Has it been the same all the way through? Like, what's been the experience?
We started, so if we talk about just Alpha participants, we started with 24. And so that was kind of my baseline. In fact, I was always asking for less, but the Lord always provided more. And then to Alpha 5, and that would just keep, it was slowly growing. But Alpha 5, we had 70.
70?
Yeah.
Whoa.
And we can't fit them. We can't fit them. We can't fit them in our meeting room, because our meeting room is quite small. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. How big is your parish? Give me a sense of scale. Like, how many people on a Sunday would you say roughly?
200.
And you've got how many? 1 second.
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
And that's on Alpha 5 that you've got like 70. So I'm like, we're for sure talking about people outside of being regular attendees that are now coming to Alpha, right? These are unchurched people?
Yeah, we have a few. We've had a few of the unchurched people. We also have those that are taking RCIA. They need to do Alpha too. That's what Father said. That's the confidence to the Alpha has really given us, that we can say, no, you need it as a pre-evangelization before you come, before you come, and that's really been fruitful in itself. But yeah, so we've had people from other parishes join into our Alpha, and a lot of inviting outside of our parish. I wouldn't. Yeah, the unchurched part we're still working on, because I think that we have still so many in the pew that do need a personal encounter again, or even for the first time. That's the reality. That was my reality. My reality.
No. Well, I think it's the reality in most Catholic parishes around the world. So it's more often the norm than not, right? So if I were to push you, Emily, and say, look, given that you've been through 5 alphas, is there one person or one story that stands out to you?
There's so many, but I mean, I do have one. I do have one, and it's a beautiful one because it's not also just about Alpha. It's about the other people that are affected by Alpha that affected her. She was coming to Mass, and she was baptized, but not Catholic. But she was coming to Mass with this particular faithful family, a beautiful family, and one day, the family kept asking, do you want to become Catholic? And she was also seeking, and she would be like, well, no, I'm not sure about the church, and and all this like Christianity, because she also had a bad experience in other churches. And so it was when she attended the Easter liturgy after coming to church, and this was the beginning. So this family had just come to our parish, and then brought her along, and so that's 2020. And so in 2021, they attended the Easter liturgy. And it was after that, she said, no, I want to be Catholic. She told the family, I want to be Catholic. And the family was like, what? And this is the family telling me. And so then I said, why? And she's like, well, first of all, she kept saying, well, your family's so beautiful, and there's so much love in your family. And I want some of that. If I had my own family, I want that. But then look at the parish. Everybody's so friendly and inviting, and why don't I want to be a part of that, right? And of course, the Easter liturgy was beautiful. If that doesn't convert you, if your heart's in the right place, then there's something else. So it was the beauty of the witness of that family. And then also the transformation that we had. Like everything was just, the timing was perfect. And you can really see that. And so she came, she had to do Alpha first. She had to do Alpha concurrently with attending RCIA. So she was really committed in that way, as well as all the others that were in the same group and batch that time. And then you really see her grow out of her shell. And just, I think it's also us being patient, not only with ourselves, but with others as well. And so the constant invitation, so I would, because, she's still uncertain, but I would continuously ask her and invite her, would you like to come help with Alpha Kids? Because we started Alpha Kids, so Alpha adults wouldn't have an excuse to say that they couldn't come to Alpha. So I said, would you like, just an easier stepping stone for her. She didn't want to be a host. She didn't want to, do other things, but do you want to hang with the kids? And just the slow invitations. And then now she's going to be coming back for our 6th Alpha to help with Alpha Kids. I think, yeah. So it's, and she's still on the journey, right? She's a new Catholic. But, I have such confidence now, if we talk about the parish that we may have been when I was back in KL, I have such confidence now with this parish to be the community that she could grow and journey with. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that sense that, like, Dan, when you were saying renovation from the Latin meaning, like, to make new, that, like, I think of it as getting, like, making ready as well. Like, not that that's the translation, but just that sense of we need our own hearts and homes made new, but when they are made new, then they are made ready for the people that we are welcoming in them, right? It's like the door is opened instead of locked. I
think also, just, Jack, when you were saying that, I was, to all those that are listening, it may sound like, everything was sequential. I went to KL, I came back to New Zealand. It wasn't. This journey was 10 years for me. It was all those things that happened, all those little things that happened, took 10 years for me to be at this stage and even have the confidence to talk about parish renewal and to even talk about my life with God. So there's hope.
Well, and that timing matters. Like, I just think this is so interesting because of what Dan and I were just like chatting about before, but this whole sense of For sure, me and Dan, you tell me whether or not this is true for you. I live in general with a very forward momentum and a great sense of urgency. One might call it anxiety, but I'm going to call it like forward momentum. And so when you keep on talking about things like, Father Austin wasn't ready yet, so you had to wait. And that 10 years in the making was God putting things into place. Yeah. I do think that those of us that were given the forward momentum, we were meant to be there on a team so that we balance other people out. I'm not just saying it's all a bad thing, but the grace of God's timing is such a miracle, because in my striving, there is no peace. And then I will believe the transformation was something I earned through blood, sweat, and tears. Instead of in God's grace, you're on your 6th alpha, you're hearing stories of individual renewal, but you're seeing a parish that is becoming a home when people walk into it. And it takes time.
Yeah, it does.
It's even more than a home. It's a community people want to belong to. I mean, the example you gave of that person's journey. I mean, it's like, there's someone saying, look, I want what you have. Let's take a moment and just realize how unusual that is in the world, right? To be like, I went to church on Sunday and I looked around, I'm like, I want what these people have.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that that's the norm, but it certainly was. It's something that happened at your parish, Emily, right? And so, and then just in that one story, and Lord knows exactly how many other hearts he's worked in that way. But it's encouraging because it tells us what's possible, right? We can create a community of faithful that other people want to belong to, that they're drawn to, they're attracted to. And it goes down to the whole belong, believe, behave paradigm as well, right? It's like, can we create a place where people want to belong and feel like they belong and are attracted in that way to the community, with the understanding that that's the on ramp. It's not let's teach you why Jesus is the most important thing. It's let's invite you in, and you'll eventually discover why Jesus is the most important thing. And it's our hope for you that you will, but we start with that sense of hospitality, community, welcomeness. And that certainly sounds like the kind of community that you and the team have created at your parish.
Yes, thanks be to God. Really, thanks be to God. Just as you were speaking, and I was just picturing our foyer. And normally at Mass, for probably a lot of us, it's go for Mass and then leave. Right now, we can't get people out of the foyer, or we can't even take the volume down. It doesn't work. But not just that. It's not just the weekends. It's not just on weekends that people are there. We're there for Elsa. We're there for novenas. We're there for our feast celebrations. We're there for bake sales. It's alive pretty much everywhere. Music ministry has come alive even more, and even down to our readers workshops we've just had, right? We're really trying to get into all the areas of our worship, right? Just as Father James says in his book. So, and then when you're first reading the book, when I was in KL, or even when we're going through it with the priests on Zoom, you're like, it's not going to happen. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the hymns improving? You're like, this is not going to happen, right? Look at our parish. When you go and then you're like, oh no, there's no hope.
Yeah.
Or it's a really, really long journey. But it's not once you step into it. I mean, it's a hard journey. And who knows what the call is for the change at any one time, but you just have to step in. You just have to take the leap. Just got to be uncomfortable. You just have to grow. Get over yourself and grow.
Emily, for you and the rest of the senior leadership team, has it been worth it?
If you ask every one of them, the answer is absolutely yes.
Wow.
Absolutely yes. The personal growth, the personal encounter, personal spiritual growth, I think you can see it on their faces. But then how that propels us on mission is the beauty. Really is the beauty. And really, you read it in the book, and you're like, yeah, alpha's a tool, and you're like, I'm not so sure. You just got to change your H's. Oh, I'm not so sure, Father James. You've done it. Nah. But once you do it and you actually see the fruits, I mean, and it's so different for each parish. Like when we meet other parishes, Pukekohe, Cheryl's parish, and we talk about our pain points, they're the same, but how you deal with it is different, right?
Yeah.
Because the priest is different, the people are different. But you just have to do it. You just have to do it, and you just have to learn and be open, so open to the Spirit to work. So yes, they would say absolutely worth it, and they're in for the ride. They're really in for the ride.
Yeah. I love it. First, I want to clarify, when you say H's, we're not talking about changing people's accents. You're talking about hymns, homilies, and hospitality. Is that correct?
That's right.
I love it. I would really want to know, from your perspective as a parish leader, with everyone that's listening right now, that there is a lot of people, there are definitely priests listening, bishops listening, but there's a lot of parishioners, like our parish leaders, that are out there right now listening. And if you could distill it down to one piece of advice for them, that they want what you have, what would that piece of advice be?
Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid of failure. Do not be afraid of rejection. Do not be afraid that you don't have the right words. Do not be afraid that you don't have the right skills, because they will come. I mean, that's grace. And we're doing the Lord's work. And if he doesn't give it to you, well, whose fault's that? But he does. He shows up. He really, really does. And this is something I have to keep convincing. Keep telling myself every day. Because the question is, why are we doing this? But when I alluded to this in the business that I was in Malaysia, when I was at my deepest, its lowest, and I was like, why am I doing this? Like, what is this for? It's so thankless. Right? It was a food business, and food businesses are really hard. And I love cooking, but cooking for customers is a totally different story. And so, why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? Whereas now, even in our hardest times, when I ask that question, who am I doing it for? What am I doing it for? The answer is totally different. I'm doing it because I love the Lord. I'm doing it because this is what he is calling me to. And where does that strength come from? It comes from him. Whereas before it was my own. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. I got carried away. Sorry, yeah.
No, that 100% answered my question. Especially, I love that you just distilled it to that. Do not be afraid. Like, just for me to hang on to those words, for other people that are listening right now to hang on to those words, because how much is it the fear, especially the fear of the unknown, like I think sometimes we think that the fear is our churches are declining. That's not the fear. The fear is, if I step out and do something different, I don't know what's going to happen. And so it's almost in a weird way, like we're afraid of what God is going to do, where our churches are going to fill up more than the decline.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a real fear. Like Father Austin's vision is 10,000 at Mass. What did I tell you it was? 200. I mean, that's
Love
a real
it.
fear. I'm just going to say, if you've ever met Father Austin, you'll be like, yeah, 200. You're like, yeah, 10,000. You're like, I'm just like, oh, no.
Just imagine, though, Emily, just imagine a room with 10,000 Catholics who are on fire for Jesus, who love him so much and who are so excited to be. I mean, imagine your foyer with 10,000 people in it. I mean, that vision is something that I can get behind as well. I mean, that. and look, with the Holy Spirit, all of these things are possible. And it's so clear that the journey you guys are on is a journey towards 10,000. So maybe you've got, 9,800 more steps to go. You're on the journey.
I know. I love it. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Emily, for being part of our journey with the Divine Renovation podcast, and really just sharing that kind of vision and that kind of hope for people that are listening as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to all of you at Divine Renovation for your ministry.